On April 12th, 2022, it was cold. That's what I remember thinking to myself as I stepped out of my house. What I expected to be nothing more than a late afternoon in the spring that would require a slightly heavier jacket quickly sent my hands into pain. In place of the supposed frost nips, it felt as if a rabid animal was violently attacking the skin that lined my fingers. But despite that, I had a promise to keep. A simple one, but a promise nonetheless. See, my girlfriend was a theater kid. You know, the kids in high school in the drama classes who most people think are just a little weird. She was one of those. However, I didn't think she was that weird. She stuck out from her crowd just by being normal. Funny, isn't it? Now, you're probably wondering what exactly about that is relevant here. Since she was a theater kid, she had stayed late after school for a rehearsal. The school play was coming up, so practice was very necessary. I do believe she has talent, but to put it lightly, some of the people in that play, who I did know personally and was friends with some, definitely needed more practice than I thought they did. They couldn't all be the next best thing. I had told my girlfriend, whose name is Lena, by the way, that I would bring her some food. My way of encouraging her. I really didn't want to step out of my house. I was perfectly happy to stay in my bedroom all evening and play video games after a long day of school. But in an attempt to be a good boyfriend, I set out. About halfway through the walk, I swore I'd never feel my face again. The cold wind seemed to stab my every pore with the sharpest cold it could throw at me. But determined as I was, I powered through and made it to my first stop, a Greek restaurant, from which I ordered takeout, a chicken pita wrap with extra tzatziki sauce, a side of fries, and a large iced tea. I wouldn't be surprised if these guys knew me by now. I was in here ordering the same thing nearly every week. Funny as it is, I don't think I've ever eaten from this restaurant myself. As they cooked up my order, I pulled out my cell phone in an attempt to give Lena a status update, only I couldn't get my messages to send. I didn't want to call and interrupt the rehearsal, so I simply put my phone away. Shortly after I did, my order was finished and set in front of me. I paid in cash and tipped quite nicely. The staff here had always gone above and beyond, which I felt deserved a reward. The man running the cash register, who was also the chef, was very humble and said he couldn't accept it. I told him I really do want him to have it. After a while, he accepted. He smiled at me on my way out and asked, "Same time next week?" I chuckled and replied with, "See you then." This would be the last time I saw him. I wasn't prepared for the cold to hit me again as I stepped outside. I always think I am, but I'm never right. I put the food in my empty backpack, hoping it would stay warm, and set out on my way. It was so strange. It wasn't snowing, or even raining, just deathly cold. What's stranger is as soon as I thought that to myself, my borderline frostbitten cheek was greeted by a snowflake, and then another, and another until they gained a consistent falling pace from the gloomy gray sky above me. Great, I thought to myself. Here I was looking forward to a nice spring, only to have those hopes crushed by a forthcoming second winter. But I knew deep down that a couple snowflakes weren't going to take my whole spring away. At least, I thought I knew that. Once I reached the school, I tried to text Lena again, almost sacrificing my hand in the process. My messages still wouldn't go through, so I decided just to step inside and hopefully run into her. I didn't want to interrupt the rehearsal, so I sat at a table in the school hallway. It was such a surreal feeling being in the school after hours. It just felt off. Every single time I've been in this building outside of school hours, I've always gotten a weird feeling in my head. But that feeling was interrupted by a couple familiar faces. Cassie and Sebastian, a well-known couple throughout our high school. Cassie was a friend of Lena's, so I know her fairly well, and she was well known throughout our school as well. Most remembered her for how outgoing she was, how little she cared about being weird, and for the reddish color of her hair that nobody else really seemed to be able to replicate. And I didn't know much about Sebastian, but I knew of him. We kept our conversation brief. Cassie had told me she stayed later to work on a culinary project. Sebastian had waited for her. I warned them of the cold, and they were off before long. I waited about 10 minutes for Lena to hopefully cross my path. My multiple attempts at texting spread through these minutes, but to no avail. It was then that I decided to simply walk into the theater. Nobody noticed as I skulked through the dark room towards the people. It was only after I almost gave Miss Ross a heart attack that people noticed me. The drama teacher, Miss Ross, had always been fond of me, oddly enough, despite the fact that I never once took her class. Perhaps it was due to me dating Lena, her favorite student, but I couldn't say for sure. As such, she was okay with me showing up occasionally to see Lena and watch what was going on in the theater. After she had greeted me, Lena and I walked out into the hallway, where we sat as she ate the food I had gotten for her. She offered me some multiple times, but I wasn't hungry. We sat and talked about how her play was going. She told me about some backstage drama involving a guy named Martin and his infatuation with a girl, Rachel, as well as some of the bizarre things he's done. She told me all about everything, as she often did. Lena had always liked to talk and know about people. She was never a gossip, that's for sure. She never started rumors. She just found humans and their behavior very interesting. And truthfully, I became intrigued by the strange thing this Martin character had been doing. Apparently, this Rachel girl was a couple years his junior, and Martin apparently had a tendency to do things in her presence most would deem completely inappropriate for a public setting, just to put it lightly. I had previously had classes with Martin, a year, maybe 2 ago. I was never fond of the guy. He and I never had any personal problems, but I can't help but feel we would never have hit it off. The more I hear about him and his behaviors, the more I believe I'm right. As we were talking, 2 more students stepped out of the theater, Chet and Luke, friends of mine. I gave them a fist bump, said hello, and made small talk, which felt strange considering these were my friends, but I knew why they had come out. As nice as it was to see them, I knew they hadn't come to see me. "Hey, Lena, we need you back now," Luke said. He said it kindly, as he always spoke. Luke was a very well-liked person around our school. Lena quickly shoved the last bit of her fries into her mouth and washed it down with a big sip of iced tea as she stood up off the ground. "I suppose I best be going now. I wouldn't want to distract you further," I said to Lena as she looked at me. "Thank you so much for the food," she said as she planted a kiss on my cheek. "I love you. I'll text you when I'm done," she said as she skipped back into the theater. My mind lingered for a moment on the fact that I wasn't able to message Lena earlier, hoping she'd be able to get through later, as I was a little worried about her walking home in the cold. At the same time, it hit me that there was no way Lena knew about the cold yet, as if she did, she definitely would have made a big fuss about me staying warm. "Go get him," I yelled to her just before she was out of reach. She blew me a kiss, and she was off. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. It had been nearly an hour. Time sure flew by. I also noticed that now my phone had no signal. Very strange for being in the middle of the city. Granted, my phone was a little old, definitely not the latest and greatest model, and it had definitely had its little quirks in the past. I put it back in my pocket, and after a brief hesitation, I headed for the door to make my way home. Bothered by the silence, I reached into my pocket to pull out my earbuds. Bluetooth sure is convenient, huh? As I walked with my head down towards the door, pulling my earbuds out of their case, I didn't bother to look up as I went to push open the door. After all, why should I? I'd walked through this door countless times, paying attention or otherwise, back turned or forward-facing. I went to put an earbud in my left ear right as I was about to use all of my body weight to open the door, as I'd done many times before. Only this time, the door didn't move. The lack of movement caused my earbud to drop to the floor and leave me puzzled. I tried pushing again with little hesitation, almost as if I had just tried to pull a push door or something like that. Once my second attempt failed, I figured something must be up. It must be locked, I thought to myself. However, that thought, as logical as it is, had vanished from my brain entirely as soon as I looked up. I saw nothing but snow, piled multiple feet above the door in front of a sky that looked no different from the pile blocking my path. I didn't panic just yet. After all, this could just be the one door, so I continued through the school. Only the more exits I tried, the faster I'd move to the next one. The main doors, side doors, stairway doors, windows even. Nothing budged. Everything stuck in its place, keeping me inside. I could feel my head start to crush itself. I had no idea what to do. With panic and anxiety filling my head, I rushed to the band room, a room full of instruments right near the theater. There were big windows in there, and I didn't want to believe what I'd seen before. I just had to see what misfortune had fallen upon me. And what I saw in that room changed my life forever. The snow had piled all the way up, even up to the building's second floor. With cell service down and snow piled to the heavens, it was clear to me that I wasn't getting out. Hell, nobody was getting out. And that was 2 weeks ago. Since then, the snow has not stopped. Nobody has cell service. Power and heating have dropped several times, and nobody knows what's happening out there. My name is Paul Murdoch, and this is my story. If you're hearing this, I'm going to hope that I gave it to you, and I'm not dead. But on the chance that I will admit seems more and more likely as the days go on, that this cold has claimed my life, I wish to do nothing more than shed light on the events that took place on that day.